Good morning, lab. Today we're going to be going over the comparative anatomy of the rat and the frog that we dissected earlier this semester. My name is Felipe Hernandez.
I'm Gisela Avila.
I'm Ilse Aguilar.
And I'm Emily Van Bagel.
For today's agenda, we're going to be going over the frog's animal background, the anatomy, as well as the rat's animal background. And towards the end, for our summer, we're going to be talking about the comparison between the two, where they have evolved from, and what common traits that they have together.
So our frog Beatrice is actually female. She belongs to the kingdom Animalia. She is a chordate. Her class is amphibian. Her order is Anora. Her family is Ranidae, and her genus is Rana temporaria. A little bit about Beatrice and frogs like her. They live around fresh water, so like ponds, rivers, lakes, and streams. And they actually need this water to keep their skin moist. They don't live necessarily in the water, but they like to live near it. A little bit about their behaviors. They hibernate during the winter. And for their mating behaviors, a male croak is actually what attracts the female. Their diet does consist of flies, moths, and worms. So for her digestive system, she does need teeth in order to hold prey, and she also uses her teeth to chomp down the prey, making it easier to digest. She has a glottis that actually is a tube that moves air from the mouth to the lungs. And next to it, she has her esophagus. The esophagus is where her prey, her food, that's where her food goes. And the tube actually leads down to the stomach. And in the stomach, she has enzymes like bile that breaks down her food. And her food is separated from nutrients and waste. The nutrients is then absorbed by the small intestines, and the waste is actually stored in the large intestines. And for her reproductive systems and excretory systems, she has kidneys that filter blood, ureters that carry urine from the kidneys to the bladder. She has her ovaries where she makes eggs, so that's where the sperm leads up and it's fertilized to make the eggs. She has an oviduct that is a coiled white tube that is around the kidneys. And a little bit about a frog cycle. A female frog will lay eggs in the water, and then those eggs will develop into little tadpoles that are fish-like creatures with a little tail. And slowly they'll develop back legs and then front legs. And then slowly they'll start moving up to land where they lose the tail. And once they're fully adapted to land, they become an adult frog. And for her respiratory system, like us, she breathes through a nasal cavity. So her cavity will actually take in air. But unlike us, we exchange gas in the lungs. For Beatrice, she actually exchanges gas through the lining of her mouth and her skin. After the gas exchange happens, the oxygenated air will then move down through her pharynx, larynx, trachea, all the way to the lungs. Then when it reaches the blood, and then back up. And for her circulatory system, Beatrice has two different parts. She has a pulmonary and systemic. The systemic pumps oxygenated blood through the body. In her circulatory system, she has a heart. Unlike ours, she only has 2 atria and 1 ventricle, where we have 4 chambers consisting of 2 atria and 2 ventricles. Her right atrium receives deoxygenated blood from the veins. Her ventricle is where the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood cross. And the left atrium is where she receives oxygenated blood from the lungs and the skin. And for her pulmonary, it actually moves blood from the lungs to pick up oxygen.
Okay, so for the nervous system, for Beatrice's nervous system, she has her brain, which is elongated. It has bilateral symmetry, and then it has a duramater that's like a tough lining to protect it. Her spinal cord is in the neural canal of her vertebral column. It's short and it's flat. Her cranial nerves emerged from her brain to all the different organs. And then her spinal nerves carry responses to the tissue. So another part of her nervous system is like the way that she moves. So frogs move by leaping. So what they do is they push through their back legs because their back legs are so long. They'll push through to push themselves forward, which gives like a leaping motion. And then this is a picture of us of Beatrice after we had dissected her. So we found that there was a large amount of fat cells in the lower portion of her abdominal region. We found out that they were actually covering the eggs. So possibly because she was pregnant, she produced fat to protect those eggs, to keep them obviously so that when she lays the eggs, the tadpoles will like survive. The fat is the bright yellow stuff around her leg that we had pulled out. She was very pregnant. She had a lot of eggs. And then we also found that her intestines inside of her body were noodle-like. They were very like ramen looking. And then we located her liver and her rib cage, and we found that her rib cage was actually very tough and it was very high up. It was higher up than we had expected. So when we were cutting through, we had a little bit of trouble. But we found that it protects the heart, and the heart is actually extremely small on a frog, and it's protected by the lungs too. And then we found her rectum, which is very small. And then, yeah, we located the gallbladder, which is also like a small pocket underneath the liver.
So moving on to our rat dissection. His name is Remy. His history, or his taxonomic name, he is within the Animalia kingdom. He is a chordata and his class is Mammalia. He's in the order of Rodentia. In the Murodea family, his genus is Rattus and his species is R. or Rattus norvegis. Within the food web, it looks as if rats eat like plants, sometimes bugs, anything they could kind of find small. And however, unfortunately, the foxes, owls, stoats, also snakes, they do prey on rats, on little Remy. So more along his history, we decided that he is best living in an urban area, such as where we live, more like city-like, because as we were researching on the different rats, the wild ones, they were kind of smaller. They looked as if they were mouse instead of rats, when ours was like huge, and he did look more like a city rat. So some biotic factors that we found in those urban areas, they live within plants, animals, bacteria, archaea, and protists. And some abiotic factors would be the soil, like the ground, water, the air and the temperature, like if it's hot or if it's cold. And we were a little skeptical on adding humidity because it kind of depends on where they live, as if it was in Florida, then it would be humid, or like California, not as much. And the mating patterns that we ended up finding was that females are more aggressive. They tend to want the best males, as in the more dominant ones. And once they produce at about 7 to 14 offsprings each litter. They have a gestation period of 21 days, and they sexually mature at around 5 to 7 weeks. And within the dissecting, we did find his navel cavity. It's a little above the mouth. We found the mouth, the gallbladder. It's very small. It's a little on top of the liver. The liver, which was like we saw was like the biggest organ that we saw take up his whole body, or his abdominal cavity. We also saw the small intestine, which is a little on top of the large intestine as well.
Moving on with Remy's anatomy, we were able to find the rib cage was very flimsy, and we'll get to that later. The male reproductive system, which we couldn't open up, the uterus diaphragm, which allows the animal to breathe. We all have a diaphragm. The trachea, the heart, the spinal cord, which basically just send electrical signals throughout the body. The kidney, or the kidneys, sorry, the bladder, and the tibia. Something else I wanted to add about the rib cage is it was flimsy, and that's mainly because they could collapse in on itself, and we'll get to that in just a moment.
So the common structures between both animals are they both do have 4 legs. They both have nostrils. They both have a digestive system, a circulatory system, a reproductive system, a nervous system, and a respiratory system. And then they both also do have spinal cords. Unique features that pertain to each of them is for Remy, because he's a rat. He has a tail, and he has male reproductive organs because he was male. And then also fur, which is probably the biggest one, because the fur is used as insulation to keep rats warm, depending on where they live, because they live in like different areas. And then for Beatrice, she has long back legs, which help her with movement. She was a female, so she has female reproductive organs. Frogs do lay eggs, so she had eggs. And to keep her warm and her body temperature regulated, she is cold-blooded. And then the picture in the bottom right-hand corner is of the eggs that we found inside of her. And this is our phylogenetic tree that we found. So if you take a look at it, you can see that the most recent common ancestor is a salmon, because frogs did evolve from fish, from a 4-legged fish. And then you can see as like it goes on that soon there are rats, and then rats have developed with gorillas.
Some main causes or drives that lead up to Remy's evolution could be predators such as large birds, larger reptiles, or in most cases, even other rats. Something else, like I mentioned earlier, the rib cage, it collapses on itself, so the rat could go into tight spaces. Tight spaces also kind of lead into the rat's smaller size. Limited food, it doesn't let the rats get too big. Humid cold environments, like I mentioned earlier, depending if it's humid or not, the rat will have thicker fur to insulate the rat, or the rat's body. Just having its homeostasis kind of get involved. Another thing that leads up to Remy's evolution is human activity. For example, our shelters. They tend to live under houses, sewer systems, or even their own burrows. Again, like I said earlier, narrow spaces, it allows their rib cage to collapse in on themselves, and camouflage. As you can imagine, they do live in darker environments, meaning that darker rats would have a more likely and will have a more likely chance of survival.
For Beatrice's evolution, some causes could possibly be predators. The predators that do go after frogs are birds and snakes. It could also be a food source issue. If there wasn't enough food to feed all the different species in the water, they may have then had to evolve to be able to go on land to find a food source. Reproduction, obviously frogs still reproduce in the water, but they can live on land once they're older. Another thing is they evolved to have webbed feet so that they could swim faster, possibly also to get away from predators or something like that. And then obviously there are very many different types of frogs, so the camouflage that they have pertains to their environment and natural selection so that they could possibly survive.
Moving on to the coevolution, well, at first glance, Remy and Beatrice may not look at all related. They do come from the same order, the Neura. They both live in human environments, and they both have many predators, very many common predators. And they both have very strong lungs, because like I said earlier, they both live in very humid environments, meaning they would have to swim and hold their breath. In addition to this, we also found out they're both cannibalistic, meaning they both will eat the young when it is necessary. These are our sources. Sources include notes on zoology.com and YouTube, but they're not limited to just that. We would like to thank you for your guys' time, and if you guys have any further questions, you could always ask us in lab, or our TA Peter could also answer some of these questions as well.
Okay, I think we're good. That was
I think so too. It wasn't too far over. So
Yeah.
I was
I
gonna say
think
if
we'll
it's,
let it slide.
exactly. I was gonna say if it's like 4 or 5 minutes over,